decent answer. So I've got one more question, and then we're going to move on to what may be one of the first ever guest demonstrations. I know that happens on other podcasts a lot, all the time, but that's never happened here. So we're in virgin territory here. So hopefully the demo gods will be kind. They were up until we tried to get this thing started, and then it went all to pot. And it got better though. It got better.
It's not looking good though.
No. Don't be Black Cloud. Dang it, Venture. Dang it. All right. So the last question I've got is, when we did Sec 542, there was a capture the flag at the end where it was us against an application. Now for 522, it's going to be you defending an application. I mean, without giving too much away, because I know the Sands dudes are real tight on that stuff. How do you defend an application, and who's attacking you?
So it's actually really wild. The day 6 defend the flag for Dev 522 is one of my favorite ones in the Sands classes I've taken, because the person doing the attack is you, and the person who's doing the defense is you. So you have to take some vulnerable code for different types of common web attacks, figure out what attack it is, and the score bot will register once you've made the attack.
Okay.
Then, once you've successfully done the attack, you need to alter the code or what the code is touching to render that attack neutral. And so you do that for all these different classes of attacks, and it's really wild. It's pretty fun.
That almost sounds more fun than 542. Of course, I've got a coin for that. Betcher, maybe you want to take 522 and get the coin for that one.
Well, there's no coin for Dev 522.
Oh,
so
man, that sucks.
Sorry. Yeah, and the thing that's really weird about that Day 6 event, the people who tend to do the best at it actually are the QA folks. From time to time, I'll have QA groups come in, and they just annihilate it. They're like, "Oh yeah, this code's buggy," and they'll like swap it out immediately. And I'm just like, "Oh, all right."
Because they're constantly looking at the code instead of writing and trying. They don't have the deadline that the devs do.
Yep.
And their job is to make sure that the code doesn't look like crap on a regular basis. So.
Oh yeah, they get it clean and tight.
Yeah. So. All right, so we're going to go to our demonstration, which will be in a video, hopefully. I am recording this, so I'm recording the audio and video. Where did you go?
All right, so it should be started.
Yeah, okay, there it is. It was already started, so.
Oh, okay.
Scared me there because all of a sudden I started talking and the screen disappeared. So, one of you mentioned. Was that PowerCat, and so you are a developer yourself. So
that's being awfully generous. I'm a really bad hack at coding, but what I can usually do is cobble things together, and what I've got is persistence more than anything else. Some folks say, "Oh, make your APT." I'm like, no. I'd be like MPT, marginal persistent threat.
Yeah.
But the thing that I like doing with PowerShell is experimenting, because right now it's such a wide open field, and quite frankly, the amount of information out there is really impressive. When I first got into IT, Microsoft was kind of renowned for having really poor documentation. But now, if you look at the amount of inline documentation that PowerShell has, and the amount of information out there on TechNet and some of the other blogs that Microsoft has, it's an amazing resource. It's a really good time to be playing around with PowerShell. So I've been doing work from the defensive side, but also a buddy of mine and I are working on using PowerShell for attacks. We've got a class at DerbyCon that's a 2-day class on how to build up your own lab and how to attack systems using nothing but PowerShell. And from a pen test standpoint, it's great, because if you write your PowerShell attack code to the version 2 standard, which is the version of PowerShell that shipped with Windows 2008 and Windows 7, which were the first ones that came with PowerShell by default, it'll work anywhere.
Nice.
And so it's a very powerful framework. The other thing is, from a defensive standpoint, this is, to my knowledge, the very first time we as Windows defenders have been able to write code once cleanly that allows you to have ultra low level API level access, and it'll work everywhere. One of the things that I was playing around with in my lab this morning before the demo gods kicked me in the teeth was PowerShell. You have the ability to directly access different DLLs, so you can make OS level API calls as if you were any part of the regular operating system. Now, from a purple team standpoint, there's a good and bad to this. Mm-hmm. From the attacker standpoint, forensics can be significantly more challenging because it's going to look like a normal API call if you're running in a process that you would expect to be running in. So how do you separate that from bad? I don't know yet, and that's an area that I've been researching. But from the blue team side, as long as you know what packages are available on that operating system or on that target environment, you have a wealth of power that you didn't have, and you don't have to like build everything from scratch now. You can just make direct net like .NET API call to create sockets, and it's very, very powerful and incredibly fast. One of the things that I joke often with the folks is that PowerCat is so fast because it's just doing low-level stuff, mm-hmm. and it's a lot different than some of the higher-level abstractions. PowerShell is an incredibly powerful tool, whether it's used by good or bad.
I don't know. So one of the tools other than PowerCat that you've created is something called the Blue Team Army, and yep. That from what you're seeing on the screen here with the fancy ASCII art and lettering, which I'm about to your greatness. You've got so this is all written in PowerShell, right? So you run the command, and this shows up with a fancy menu, I almost say Metasploit-esque, but it's not really.
It's closer to the social engineering toolkit. Yeah. This interface is. That said, there's I am going to be making other interfaces for this tool. There's basically what you're looking at is a menu interface that mm-hmm. drives down to the actual PowerShell script that will do the particular task. And so the idea behind this interface is so that you could get up and running and do some work without having really much familiarity with how this tool works or these different commandlets work. Ultimately, I think that once you go super power user, you're probably going to want to go directly to the individual commands directly, because you could make your own meta scripts that will be doing who knows what. My goal with this is to have something flexible and extensible like the social engineering toolkit or Metasploit or Core Impact, where you're able to write a little bit of code and have it plug into a larger framework so that you don't have to make use of all these, have to go through all the work of setting up a logging facility and your, all the other things. You will configure that once and be done with the Blue Team Army. At least that's the battle plan. This is in pre-alpha, and so there's some interesting bugs and stuff that we've been finding, and hopefully it'll be getting better.
They're unintended features.
Yeah, unintended features abound.
All right. So why would somebody want to use Blue Team Army other than just being on the Blue Team and having? Since this is in PowerShell, you must only be able to use this on a Windows environment, I would imagine.
As of right now, this is Windows only. But the advantage that this gets you is it's a very fast way of interacting with your domain. And take, for instance, the user tasks. If you go into the user tasks. Now, I'm not going to be able to run the demo since my VMs and domain are all hosed up. The thing that you'll find that's interesting is PowerShell can interact with a domain in a couple different ways, and the way that I'm using is a new facility that came out with Windows Server 2008 SR2, and that facility is called Active Directory Web Services, and they are it's unbelievable how fast these are compared to more traditional ways of interacting with a domain. So for instance, if I did find user and then opted to do find user where the last name is Douglas, it would get the response back rather fast, maybe sub 5 seconds. Now the thing that's interesting about this is I've used these techniques in large domains, and the 5-second turnaround time is pretty consistent. And in the largest domain that I was able to use this technique, it was 300,000 user objects. So it scales, and it scales beautifully.
Now, where does it store the output? Is it just on the screen, or is it in a SQLite file, or just plain text? Or?
Yep. So one of the things that is broken right now is the option 77 reconfigure BTA.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'll let folks have is the choice on how they want to store their results. The default is to use some database of some sort, and you point it to it. You give it if you've got like an OLE or an ODBC connection, you would put the connection name and the login information needed for that. If you're doing a link to Oracle or MS SQL, you point to that. But if you want, you can have it go to like an XML file, you could also create access files. If you've got like a small environment, you could do that. So it's really up to you. I would prefer you to use databases, but sometimes you just need to output to something else.
What is this option 5 countermeasure tasks?
Yeah, so option 5 is where you get more into the active defense type things. When you go into the countermeasures, this is where you can do things like honeyports. And what you will do when you go into this option is you select, hey, I want to go into honeyports, and then you would specify what services you want to fake and on what systems you want to have that fake running. And then when somebody connects to that honeyport, you can do any variety of escalations. If you, this won't be a new thing to longtime listeners of the Security Weekly show. We have a lot of fun with honeyports. One of the things that we like to use honeyports for is we'll do something like having a fairly common running service like 25, or maybe back when people were doing NTP-based DDoS, we would set up 123 UDP on there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you make a connection to that port, that host can do things like put the attacking IP address in its firewall. So as a pen tester, I've only twice run into this, and it's the scariest thing because you're scanning the environment. You'll do like a half open or stealth SYN scan, and honeyports won't trigger on those because it's not an established connection. SYN scans can be spoofed, but what you can't do is spoof an established connection. And if you make an established connection with the honeyport, it will do any number of attack things, or not attacked, that's not the right word, all of these countermeasures. So as soon as you hit that port, that system could be brought offline as far as you can see it, but it's up and running, working fine. And as an attacker, when I've done pen tests, it's the scariest thing. The story that I like to tell is that, or the analogy rather that I like to use, is that it's the equivalent of watching the stars go out at night one by one. And it's the most unsettling thing ever. There's been a couple times that I've called the point of contact at an organization saying, hey, I'm really sorry I knocked your, whatever server over. And they're like, no, you didn't. I'm like, no, really, it's offline. I can't reach it at all. And they're like, no, we have honeyports. And then I'm like, Crud.
Dang
In
it.
fact, honeyports are so effective, believe it or not, they're currently banned in the CCDC challenges, where different colleges try to defend their little game networks from professional pen testers.
Hmm.
Honeyports are seen as too unfair an advantage to the defenders. So you got to ask yourself, unfair for the defense? Yes, please. We got a couple other fun ones in here. One that I rather like is the WebBug documents. Few people realize this, but Microsoft Word is a web browser, and it's a fully featured web browser. So you can actually create an HTML document that looks a lot like a Word doc file.
Hmm.
And when it opens, if that's making a callback to a unique CSS file or a unique image file that isn't linked to anywhere else on the internet, you can usually, or almost always, you're able to get the originating IP address of the attacker. And the reason this works is they'll be using Tor or some other anonymization service like I2P. And once they get that document, they will open it thinking that they're safe behind their anonymization. The problem is that Word does not use Tor. It can't really. It's not set up to do that.
Hmm.
And so when you open it up, it makes that call and you get the originating IP. And John at Black Hills has used that very effectively in a couple cases to catch pedophiles. He was able to work with the ISPs in the area, and you just say, hey, here's the scenario. You want to help make a very bad person go to jail? And they say, oh, heck yeah, sign me up. So WebBug docs are great.
Is that part of his Honey Badger operation?
It's fairly similar to Honey Badger, but it's not. Honey Badger is a little bit different. Honey Badger is a Java applet that will turn on the wireless card in your device if it's not already on, and then report in what the signal strength is of the SSIDs in the area. And by using that, they're able to make queries against geolocation services like that Google or Apple have online, and we're able to get resolution down to like really only a couple of feet. I've seen it as small as like about 12 feet. Usually it's somewhere in like the 50 meters range, but if you compare that versus a standard geo IP lookup, which you're lucky if it's at the city level.
Yeah. No, that's understandable. So so you can set up all of this stuff on various Windows boxes. You mentioned earlier, you said not right now for Windows. Are you saying that this can be cross-platform in the future?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is that PowerShell has an incredibly rich feature set in terms of how you can do things at the network layer. There's two areas that I need to investigate. One of them is that with PowerShell you can stand up a network API, and you would have to make some sort of a Unix system that queries that API on an ongoing basis.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's interesting is that Carlos Perez made a SSH client that runs entirely in PowerShell. And so by using that, you could actually have Blue Team Army log into any Unix system that you have permissions to log into and do a number of tasks.
He didn't roll his own crypto for the SSH implementation?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
Woo! All right, dodge that bullet.
Yeah, it's just a SSH client. It's not the server.
Okay. That's still rather impressive. You don't have to download WinSCP or PuTTY to make it work. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
But and even if we had to go that route, we could do that through some of the expect-like capability that PowerShell has, and that you can create a socket stream and have it work that way. It would be a little kludgy, but we'll have to see how it goes. That's down the road.
So if somebody can somebody get a hold of Blue Team Army if they wanted to? Do you have a GitHub or something?
Yeah, I do have a GitHub. I will be putting it up sometime toward the end of this week. So Realistically, you're looking at about the 23rd. May 23rd, 2015 is when that will be available.
So
There's a
by the
couple
time this
more.
comes, by the time we broadcast this, it should be up and available.
Yes, and here's the other thing. I am one of those devs that know my code stinks. So if you take a look at it and say, Mick, this is a train wreck, I know. Help me make it better. Just point out things that I should be doing. Like if I'm doing something really odd, let me know. If I have totally missed some function that would make life easier, please let me know.
And this is all PowerShell, so it's a pretty low barrier to entry if somebody can just...
Oh, very low barrier to entry. The barrier to entry is so low, all you have to do is type git-help and then the particular thing that's going on. One of the things that I actually got into PowerShell, especially PowerShell v2, so much, because on a Windows 7 box, by default, all the commandlets that come with it have a -examples flag, so that you can actually do git help, the command that you want, say like git help wmi-object, and then -examples, and there's sample code and why you would want to use it and how you would use it. It's the best thing ever.
Awesome.
You got a trademark on this?
I'm going to get that up there.
Just put your little service mark up there. So you mentioned earlier, just in passing, you were going to be teaching at DerbyCon.
Yes.
DerbyCon 2015.
So, yes, DerbyCon 2015. Adam Crompton and I will be doing a 2-day class on using PowerShell for penetration testing. We're going to be going over all the common attack tools, things like Nishon, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Powersploit, PowerCat, obviously, and also go over some of the things that I mentioned briefly, like how you can make direct DLL API calls for great hijinks. One of the other things that we're going to be doing is showing you how to use tools like Amazon's EC2 instances to create your own domain on the cheap. So you can spin up an Active Directory very, very quickly and easily in an Amazon Cloud instance. And if you steer clear of a couple options, you can even run it for completely free, as in $0, which is always a nice price.
So how would you do that? Are you running it over like Microsoft Global Catalog over SSL? Or are you running it on 636 for the LDAP SSL? Because I can't imagine you're going to be making it 80 commands over unencrypted connections. That would be kind of...
No. What we actually have you do is set up a open VPN to connect to your instance. And the advantage of this is that you can actually, if you so choose, you can bind your local Windows machine to that cloud domain and then use that as if it were a workstation within the domain, because that's what it actually is. And so another thing we show are like how to get Microsoft has a couple VMs that are available for limited use, for non-commercial use. We'll show you how to get those, how to set those up and use those so that you can test your attacks against all the current supported and even not so supported desktop operating systems. You can actually go as far back as XP and get that for free and run it in a lab environment.
Okay.
But I'm not a lawyer. So if people are getting frothy at the mouth that I'm doing this wrong, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. So we're going to be at DerbyCon, so we'll definitely have first round will be on us, Mr. Douglas. Right. If you would, I will have hot cider. Mr. Betcher will probably have milk in a dirty glass, and we'll definitely have to get together and have some talks. So
I'd love that. One other thing to just push the class a little bit: DerbyCon is now sold out. So the only way that you can get into DerbyCon at this point is to buy the training.
Okay.
And then you can use that training as your ticket in.
Really? So you have
Oh,
to
really?
spend so it's like $1,000 for a ticket instead of what, 375 or
Yep.
something. Because I was
Yeah,
PWT, so I couldn't do the training and attend DerbyCon. I should have probably, you know. But if you go
Saved
to
them.
training, you're gonna miss all the DerbyCon stuff, right?
no, negative. The training is 2 days before DerbyCon. They
Oh,
used to do it the evening of, though on DerbyCon 1 they did it the evening of, and that just didn't work out.
okay.
So it's always been, so for the past now 4 years, it'll always be the 2 days before.
Okay. So you get your foot in the door, and then you don't have to leave the hotel, and you just show up to other things.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, that sounds nice. Yeah, I'll be there 25th through the 28th, and me and Mr. Betcher are sharing a room. I think we got one king size bed, so I get the big
You guys
spoon.
can
Yeah.
work out who the big spoon is.
Yeah, I get a big spoon. Calls it. Um, but yeah, we'll definitely meet at DerbyCon and have some good times. I'm sorry you would have enjoyed being out here in Seattle. It's 76 degrees today. It's fantastic weather. So,
Oh, well,
yeah.
another time, I'm sure that we'll keep on trying. You don't let one little setback
That's true.
derail everything.
That's true. There's another Sands opportunity up here. I think October 5th through the 10th here in Seattle. There's a Sands course up here, and we have B-side Seattle. So, when we do call for papers for that, you should come on up. We have 150 people ravenous for talks by good security people. So, um, yeah. So yeah, Mick, thank you for coming on the podcast. We'll definitely try to get that other video you wanted to show us on. And uh, other than DerbyCon, is there any place else that you're going to be speaking in the near future? I know you did ThoughtCon just the previous week here on the 16th and 17th, or actually it was what, the 14th, 15th, something like that, Thursday and Friday.
Well, I was just there for like helping to promote SANS type stuff. I wasn't giving a
Okay.
talk. The next talk that's coming up for me is on June 5 at
Okay.
614Con, which is Columbus, Ohio's conference.
Oh, very nice.
So that'll be a good one. I'll be talking about the latest and greatest that we've been doing with PowerCat. There's some really interesting things that we've been playing with, and hopefully it's all stable by that time.
Nice. Well, I look forward to checking out that video when it becomes available. So, Mr. Betcher, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask Mr. Douglas here?
Well, just one. Do you think since, well, you mentioned that you're sad that more blue teamers aren't taking these classes and you say there's more red team interest. Is that just because the blue teamers out there? Because I know there's more of them than red teamers. There has to be. Are red teamers just more interested in improving their knowledge or learning or hungry for the next opportunity, and the blue teamers are kind of more stagnant and set in their ways and things like that?
Or
You
hamstrung by
know,
company policies where they can't get the technology or training that they need or deserve?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say this: the half-life of information use as a pen tester is shockingly small. So you do have to train a lot to stay sharp. Um, that said, I'm starting to see things that are giving me a little bit of hope. SANS has a conference called DFRCon where
Mm-hmm.
they only teach digital forensics and incident response type classes. There was the security, the SOC summit that happened only about a month ago now in DC, so that's cool. There's the different ISACs, like FS ISAC is really starting to take training seriously. There's the FS ISAC conference in Miami that's started today, I believe. So, it's getting there. We don't have as many events, we don't have as much training, but I'm hopeful that that does change and soon, because there are more blue team folks than there are red team folks. So, with luck, there will be more. But what I would really like to see is more of just where there's blue tracks to the different hacker conferences, because I really do think that we would be doing a huge disservice to the defenders if we started having our own little walled garden of here's our security conference and you attackers go over there. We need to be breaking down those barriers and talking with one another so that we understand what the attacks are. One of the weirder things that ever happened in my career, and this was years ago when I was still working at the library co-op, I was at a conference and I actually attended a talk of somebody who had attacked our network. And after the talk, I just walked up and I was like, hey, my name's Mick and I work here. And they were like, oh. And I was like, yeah, I know about that. I'm not going to, just cut it out, please. You should be a good guy. You're a smart one.
Yeah.
So
don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah,
Words
exactly.
to live by.
Yep. Wow. So, all right. Thanks, Mick, for joining us here on the podcast. Maybe in the next couple of months, I know Mr. Betcher's he takes vacation, so there's the month of July is going to be, basically myself and somebody else. Maybe we can invite you back on.
I'd love that
podcast with me, and hopefully we'll get Mr. Jared Freitas back on. I said it right, Mr. Betcher, Freitas. Yeah, he's going to like that. So we have a Twitter. At BrakeSec, BRAKE-SEC, for the official podcast Twitter. I'm at Brian Brake. Mr. Betcher is at BetcherPwned. Mick Douglas, where can we find you on the tweeters?
I am at Better Safety Net.
Better Safety Net. That's a hell of a lot better and easier to say than Brian Brake. Yeah. So we're on Patreon. If you find value in the podcast you just listened to and think that you'd like to reward us, Mick won't unfortunately get any money out of the podcast, but we thank him for coming on. If you find value in the podcast, please feel free to donate. It's entirely optional. We have our regular, we have Andre and John and Nathaniel, who are still our patrons, and we appreciate them. We're on SoundCloud, we're on Tumblr, we're on Facebook, we're on iTunes. You leave us some reviews on iTunes or on SoundCloud. I just figured out how to post these on YouTube, so we're on YouTube as well. We have a YouTube channel there. So there's really no way that you cannot find the podcast. I spend a lot of time putting these up so you can find them. So but that was it for this week for Bringing Down Security. The demo went rather well. I hope we have more of those in the future because we got GoToMeeting now for a monthly thing for our interviews. So come back soon, and we hope you have a great week.
Bye-bye.